So we have a Rachel Skirker of 36 right circle. Just
Thank you for giving me the chance to speak again tonight. My name is Rachel Skirker. I serve as the Health and Safety Chair for the AEA. There are a few points that I would like you to consider as you are thinking about our schools tonight. First, as we approach the holiday season, APS staff are being reminded of the rules about traveling and possibly the need to quarantine if going to a state that is not on the approved list. How will we ensure that students and families adhere to these rules as well? COVID spread is expected due to the mixing of COVID circles. How do we ensure that students and families are adhering to the recommendations of not mixing households and only 10 people max at a social gathering? Second, it is impossible to know that spread is not occurring within our schools because we are not testing. We do not know how many asymptomatic kids are spreading the virus because we are not testing. What we can say is that those who have been symptomatic do not seem to be spreading it. Hopefully that is because once symptoms occur, the students are staying home. Third, the governor announced on Friday that the first field hospital will be built in Worcester to be ready for the first week in December. Rhode Island is preparing to open a field hospital as well. As the medical facilities that we rely on, especially those of Miriam Hospital and Rhode Island Hospital, start to reach capacity, and as we continue to watch both the average daily incidence rate and the percent positivity increase, we must ask, how can we help the hospitals not become inundated like in the spring? Fourth, over and over, we have had the metrics for when schools are safe to stay open change. We have been in the red and met all of the metrics before the recommendations were changed more than once. What will actually happen when we go into the red this time? Will safety finally be the #1 consideration? Lastly, I would like to thank all of the staff who are in person. They are working so hard to give students a safe education while putting themselves at risk. We are not giving these people the gratitude and praise that they deserve. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the video? Okay. Next is Nancy Block. Hello, Ms. Block. Feel free to address the meeting.
Thank you for hearing me. My name is Nancy Block. I'm a parent of a student at Attleboro High School. First, I want to thank all the teachers that have given our children such a great educational opportunity. And I want to thank all of the school committee members and the administration for providing our students the opportunity. I think it's very important that we remain hybrid as our students are receiving a much better education when they have the chance to be face-to-face with their teachers and communicate with other students. And I request that this evening, if there is a vote, that the schools do remain hybrid going forward. Thank you for listening to me today.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum tonight?
Next we have Kelly Lavoisier, the AEA.
Hello, Ms. Labossiere.
Good evening, Superintendent Sawyer and members of the school committee. My name is Kelly Labossiere, and I am a 7th and 8th grade science teacher at Coelho Middle School, and I am speaking on behalf of the middle school teachers. After reading a nearly 10-page document of the thoughts and concerns of the middle school educators, there are 2 main points that we would like to make. First, what we are currently doing in the hybrid model is working for many teachers and students. Each school's adherence to strict distancing, mask mandates, hand washing, and vigilance about ventilation and cleaning has proven that the hybrid model is the best way to serve our students at this time. The virtual portion of our teaching does not resemble the slapdash version from the spring. Students and staff have received intentional training, and over the past 9 weeks, we have proven that our technologies and capabilities are working. Teachers are making the most of their in-person time, and a large majority of students are connecting and completing work during their remote days. Is it perfect? No. But hybrid seems to be the best compromise for safely educating our children at this time. There seems to be concern after Governor Baker's recent comments that you may be considering bringing more students back into school full-time. This notion is downright frightening to many. We would not be able to meet the CDC or World Health Organization guidelines for social distancing of 6 feet if we go back into full in-person learning. It is physically impossible to double the number of desks in most classrooms and keep students even 3 feet apart, let alone 6. There is not room enough for students to walk from classrooms to the cafeteria if we had 100% students in the buildings. As one teacher stated, if my line had 30 kids in it, it would be over 100 feet long and definitely hard to make sure everyone maintains social distancing. Additionally, with a classroom full of students, the teacher will literally just be sitting at his or her desk in order to maintain proper distancing from students. That's no way to teach or learn. Our jobs as educators is to ensure the safety and well-being of our students. We fear that if schools open fully, we would not be able to meet their needs and that COVID transmission will increase, forcing a switch to fully remote learning, which is what we have been avoiding so far by sticking to the safety guidelines. I would like to conclude with 2 quotes from our middle school staff. The stress is more real than you can imagine. Mental health should be our priority to keep teachers going through all of this change. Asking us to take greater risks is in a full in-person model defeats that purpose. And I am literally terrified to move into a full in-person model and suspect many others are too. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum?
Next, we have Aaron Sullivan of the AEA.
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Sullivan.
Good evening, members of the school committee, Superintendent Sawyer, Assistant Superintendent Regan. My name is Erin Sullivan. I teach social studies at Attleboro High School, and I'm speaking as an AEA representative on behalf of the high school teachers. A number of high school faculty shared their thoughts and concerns surrounding hybrid learning and the unsafe idea of switching to full in-person learning. This is a summary of some of my colleagues' concerns and part of my story. One student in my classroom had COVID. 5 students surrounding that student were quarantined for 2 weeks, in addition to the ill student. My class was 1 out of 5 classes the student attended during the day. The classroom is larger than most rooms. I keep the windows open at all times. Some classrooms do not have windows. If around 30 students were in my classroom, more students would have been sitting close to the student and have been quarantined. The situation would repeat itself in 4 other, perhaps smaller classrooms. In another COVID case, one teacher had 2 students remaining in class after quarantines. Another had 1. This is when case numbers were lower. A CTE teacher shared that it is difficult to keep students distanced with 12 students in the shop with limited space, yet with a necessity to work together. The teacher says, and I quote, "The risk of close contact is difficult to control under the hybrid model. Hybrid is pushing the limits, full in person, and it becomes unavoidable a matter of time. Full in person would prove disastrous to all. Remote is our best option until we can all learn safely again." Many teachers express difficulties with the hybrid model. There are a number of students not coming to school and are, according to a colleague, quote, "just choosing to work virtually, but are not actually completing work." This colleague recommends a synchronous remote schedule with attendance taken every block. There are other students who are waiting for AVA. There is some concern about accountability for those not attending school. Some high school students are working outside jobs. One of my colleagues shared the following, and I'm going to quote in its entirety here. "We must go fully remote and offer synchronous real-time classes for all students. Of my caseload of 291 students, 17% are enrolled in the AVA, and many are struggling to meet expectations. Another 12% have been quarantined due to close contact with a COVID positive person and were forced to participate in school via assignments in Google Classroom for 2 weeks. Nearly 10% of my students are no longer coming to school, opting to stay on the AVA waitlist, or simply work remotely. These numbers do not include any students who stay home due to anxiety or other stressors without informing the school of their decisions. We are not educating these students, this teacher says. From my conversations with parents, many who want in full person because their students are not getting the instruction they need to succeed in their classes. Others who feel students are not safe coming to school also feel they are not getting necessary instruction to be successful. We can satisfy both of these concerns and keep everyone safe by going fully remote and educating our students in the same way many other districts are successfully doing across the country. And that's the end of the quote from that teacher. I live in Attleboro and I have a child in the schools, and I am concerned about the safety of my community and my family. The community trusts the schools with our most valuable assets, the students, and full in-person model cannot adhere to the guidance and jeopardizes the safety of all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum? Okay. Is there anyone else? Does she have, what does she have issues with? Is it with their microphone or with Zoom at all?
I can't activate her microphone because she has an older version.
Does she want to type in a comment? If she wants to type in a quick comment and it can be read aloud.
Try and bring her in as a panelist.
Okay.
See if that helps. Okay, she can begin.
All right. Hi, please feel free to address the committee at open forum.
Oh, good evening. I am an elementary school art teacher at Hyman Fine, servicing grades K through 4. I am currently working from a cart in the students' classrooms and travel to 5 different classrooms daily. I will be speaking on behalf of many elementary school educators across the district who were willing to share their concerns. After reading pages of comments, I have summarized and pulled quotes that I feel express the consensus. Teachers want to be in school with their students. There is no doubt about that, but they are worried about the possibility of transitioning to full in-person. The hybrid model has been a challenge, particularly at the elementary level, but with sincere effort, tireless work, endless collaboration, and the usual creativity of elementary teachers, we have created an environment that works for students and teachers. From a 4th grade teacher, full in-person instruction would inhibit our ability to meet student academic needs. We will no longer be able to conduct reading groups, provide intervention, or conference with students. Based on space constraints, we would be forced to teach our students in a whole group setting with very little movement breaks for 6.5 hours every day. Even under current circumstances, our students are exhausted by the end of the day, asking continually how many hours are left till dismissal, how long until the next mass break, when can we work together, can we have a break, can we go for a walk? And it should be noted that even under the hybrid model, multiple students in each of my cohorts complain daily of headaches and upset stomachs. They have risen to the occasion and adapted to the hybrid model and have just begun to gain confidence and understanding of expectations. From a kindergarten teacher, my classroom cannot handle more than 10 children safely following the 3 to 6 feet apart. Every day someone is closer to me than I'd like. They need shoes tied, jackets zippered. They need help putting everything into their backpack. They need help tracing, cutting, holding scissors correctly, adjusting someone's pencil grip, guiding them to clean up when they don't want to, helping them get in line. My families are doing an excellent job with the new hybrid model. Why change it? The families have figured out a good plan for the children learning at home. Changing their schedule now or even flipping back and forth from hybrid to full to remote would be very, very disturbing. From a school nurse, I feel the biggest reason that we are not seeing in-school transmission is because of all the safety measures that have been put into place, specifically wearing masks and physical distancing of a minimum of 6 feet. We are struggling now to find space as students are coming back from the AVA. If we were to follow DESE's guidelines of a 3-foot distance between individuals, we will be doubling the number of students who may need to quarantine due to possible exposure to a COVID positive person. You would also greatly increase the risk of seeing in-school transmission, at which point you would have to switch to remote learning for all. You will also increase the number of staff who would need to quarantine, and there aren't enough substitutes for teachers or for the nurses. I would like to end with a few quotes from students who are really struggling with this mode we have now. I cry and cry before school. It is scary and not warm at school. I'm afraid to be in the wrong place. The kids forget to social distance and get too close, and I'm not comfortable. The kids are getting lax and they come into my space. I want to be in school, then I get there and I want to cry. It's not what it used to be, and it's exhausting. There is nothing to look forward to. I'd rather be at home, like on Wednesdays, with all my classmates, and then I don't have to worry and feel exhausted as much. I cry the night before going to school. I'm overwhelmed, and school tries to go on like nothing is different, but it's so different. Talking to my friends isn't the same. I have to look forward all the time. There are no breaks. They pretend like a mask break is a break for your brain, and it is not. I want to close by saying I am amazed and impressed daily at how educators, families, and students are handling an extremely difficult year. There has been so much change in the lives of these little ones, and consistency is super important. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee at open forum? All right, seeing none, I will go ahead and close open forum. Turn it over to our business agenda, and we'll start with the superintendent's report. Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman. I should start by acknowledging the sentiment that we heard expressed by many of the people who contributed to open forum tonight. It is no doubt that what we're endeavoring to do day in and day out is tremendously difficult. It's a challenge for everyone involved. Certainly our educators and the staff that support them find this to be the greatest challenge that they have experienced in their professional careers. And we've already talked about how in a hybrid model, there's also a tremendous strain on families and the impact of only having 2 days of school a week. And then certainly, all of us involved, really, really find it very, very difficult to hold this together under these circumstances. And I think, as many people said today, it's really a tribute to everyone involved, the families, the educators, the other people involved, that we are pulling together and doing the best we possibly can under these circumstances. And there is a lot to find fault in. I don't think anybody thinks that this is going swimmingly. It isn't. It's very, very, very hard on all of us. But we know that we got into a business to serve children, and children need us, and we believe that we're doing the best we can to meet them as safely as possible. So in light of that, I want to review the circumstances in the district, both in terms of our data, but most importantly, how that data fits with the new guidance. So as I'm sure most people who care enough to watch this at home know, our data this week was the highest levels that we have experienced since guidance was provided for us back in August. Our average daily cases is up to 21.2. Our positivity rate is over 4 at 4.11. As I previewed for you on Friday and then provided this evening, the final version, we had 19 positive cases in the district last week. We hadn't had double digits in a week at all throughout this entire fall. And then this week we shot past that and almost had 20. So I think it's pretty safe to say that on a community level, things are as bad as they've been in a long time. I think we're looking at numbers that are closer to May than anything we've seen in between. So it was in that context that we received new guidance. And I wanted to review the specifics of that new guidance because we haven't been together since it's been released. So first, the old guidance had one metric, which was the average daily cases per 100,000. And now we have two. It's that, and there's also the positivity rate, which we've always talked about. So this isn't a big adjustment for us because we've always been considering it. But now in terms of the color coding, both those measures are being factored in. I should note that the average daily cases went from 8 up to 10. So they did adjust upwards a little bit. And the positivity rate, they have set for Attleboro as 5%. I would point out that this 5% is relevant to communities in size of 10,000 to 50,000. This seems a little bit arbitrary to me. And again, I always talk about how I'm not a doctor and I'm not. So I guess they understand something that I'm having a hard time getting my head around. But it seems to me that Attleboro is a community of almost 47,000 people, have a lot more in common with a community with 50,000 people than we do with a community of 10,000. And so communities of 50,000 or more, their positivity rate is 4%. So we would be over that if 3,000 more people lived in Attleboro, and according to our population numbers. But that is not the case. We are in just under 50,000. So with either of those rates, the positivity rate or the average cases, that makes us yellow. If you have both of them, that makes you red. And so I would make a case that we should be worried about our positivity rate, given that we are much closer to 50,000 than we are to 10,000, and that would be a 4% rate if we were over 50,000. But as I'm going to get into, in fact, in the new guidance, it actually doesn't really matter, and it's not worth getting all that riled up about. So that's the new metric, and I should point out that this new metric, which they released on November 6th, completely replaces the guidance that they had released on 8/11. So it's not a revision, it's not on top of. They basically are saying, ignore the old guidance. This is now the new rules. As I expressed to the staff in an email, I do think that the optics here are a little bit concerning. They picked a measure, they expressed that to us all, told us that that's how we should make our decisions. And then the unintended consequence was that, by Halloween, the state had turned a deep shade of red, and suddenly we changed the metrics. And now, even though our numbers are almost twice as bad as they were at that time, we're now being told we're yellow. But again, that doesn't really matter so much, because in the new guidance, yellow means expected to have student learning fully in person if feasible. This is because the guidance says that we need to prioritize in-person learning across all color-coded categories. So in effect, the color codes don't matter anymore under the guidance. It's in person as much as you can do under any circumstance. Now, the state claims that their reason for doing this is a growing body of evidence that students should remain in school. And again, while I don't think the timing of this looks particularly good in terms of what the motivation is. As I pointed out to the staff in my communication to them, that doesn't mean that it's entirely untrue. So, and I've said this many times before, I'm going to say it again. As of today, we can still say that the schools are absolutely safe, that the guidance that we've been following has been working for us. And that's not just true in Attleboro, it's been true across the state. The transmission rates are significantly lower in school than they are out in the general populace, right? We have roughly 6,000 kids in Attleboro, and we've had almost just about 50 positive cases so far up until this point. So that we have had 0 cases in school due to in-school transmission suggests that more kids are contracting the virus through their daily lives than we have kids contracting the virus through school, because right now we don't have any evidence that anyone has. So schools remain a safe place. And I think that they're seeing that across both the Commonwealth and across the nation, and they're making the case that their caution in the summertime, which is what the original guidance was written on, reflected that they did not really know what to expect once they reopened schools. Well, schools have been open. We've been open for 10 weeks, and we have some really strong data that suggests that these things are working. But they're working because we are following the guidance. And as I said at the last meeting, I think we should all continue to follow the guidance. So that guidance says we're yellow, and the yellow guidance again says expected to have student learning fully in person if feasible. And so that's what the guidance says, if feasible. Well, as you heard today from several of the people who participate in open forum, following the guidance, again, I brought it just for the visual effect of it. This is the printed guidance that the state has produced through COVID, right? This is a 4-inch binder. We filled this one up around Halloween time. We've started our second one. This is what is turning our lives upside down. Our effort to adhere to this, and it is working because the staff and the teachers in the buildings every day are vigilant and working hard to make sure that we follow these suggestions, these rules from the state that are going to keep us safe. So if we follow these rules, we cannot go fully in person in Attleboro, right? For one, we can't transport the children, all the children we would need to transport, because of the guidance around how we transport kids. Remember, the guidance reduces the capacity of our buses to 1/3 their normal capacity. So even if you create new schedules and completely upset our schedules in the buildings to create a double session situation, you still don't get to the full capacity of our buses. And it's not like we can afford more buses or that there are more buses available. So transportation is a huge problem. The next one, lunch, just the operation of lunch, right? To eat lunch, you have to be at least 6 feet because you have to take your mask off to eat, right? The space required to have everybody do that is more than we can do, right? It's not logistically possible to run lunch in our buildings. As you heard, there are other operational concerns in buildings. But when you get right down to it, we have many, many classrooms who cannot hold students, even if we give up on the guidance says 6 feet wherever possible, but at least 3 feet. As a district, we have tried to get to 6 feet in as much as possible. There are rooms in which it's less than 6 feet, but the number of spaces that are down at 3 feet are slim to none. We would have to abandon that to get fully in person. We'd have to go down to 3 feet. And even at 3 feet, we have multiple places in buildings across the district in which we wouldn't be able to fit everybody in. So distancing isn't possible under this. So, these are all logistical reasons. But I'll have to also tell you that even if we could cram everybody in, right, at 3 feet, at some point you have to think through the instructional impact of having those kids in and the teachers needing to follow the guidelines with those kids in at that distance. And so, right now, one of the struggles that I think teachers are up against is that they have to find ways to deliver their lessons in a way that is sensitive to the fact that we can't do a lot of the things that we normally do. And to do that with twice as many kids in the room would be again, near impossible. So for all of these reasons, I just need to be very clear that under the current guidance, it isn't feasible to be fully in person. And so I believe that we are completely in compliance with the guidance when we say fully in person is not feasible. So even though we are yellow, I think that the hybrid model is compliant with what the guidance is calling for, given the conditions. The last thing I would say about the new guidance is that if you are red in the new guidance, that is now means hybrid, not remote. They say that going fully remote should only be used as a last resort. The state has taken a very strong stand that they think kids should be in school, and that from their perspective, there's no reason for kids not to be in school as much as possible. And so what is as much as possible? Well, they recognize that because of differences between districts, that's going to be different. They recognize that they can't enforce a universal standard, but they are making it clear that they don't think anyone should just be home remote full time. And I don't know exactly what they're going to do to the districts that are currently there, but they've led us to believe that they will be, challenging those districts through regulatory means to, get them to reconsider what they are doing currently. So, there's been a real shift in the way that they're thinking about the matter and what they're expecting of us. So we're being told, to be in a full remote is only a last resort after you've tried multiple other things, and that they want us all in person, but they recognize that being fully in person just isn't feasible for a lot of different communities. And I think that you'll find that we're not different from many of our surrounding communities in facing these challenges that I've outlined for you. So, if I had to put this all together, I'd say that, while things are safe, right now, I would not say things are going smoothly. We have significant numbers of kids who are testing positive. That number has really, really spiked. That has resulted in lots of close contacts. Not the worst situation we've had with close contacts, because there are so many individuals who are out as close contacts of somebody that when they test positive, they've actually a lot of times been out for long enough that they're not considered close contacts for anybody. But the number of kids who are out as a result of all of this has a pretty significant impact. And as I'm going to talk about in a moment, the number of staff being affected now has increased significantly. And it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, but as a district, we are struggling with substitutes. We do not have the normal pool of subs that, in a normal year, we would say is low. And so just operating our building and having enough bodies to run the schools is becoming an increasing problem, which I worry about. So, we have real concerns here. Aside from the logistical reasons why I think it's not feasible to go fully in person, I'd just like to point out that while I agree with the state's assessment that these first 10 weeks have demonstrated that under the conditions we were operating in the fall, schools are not a more significant transmission of what you're seeing in communities. In fact, in Attleboro, I can say definitively that it's less than that. While I think that that's true, I don't know that we can say definitively what the future holds for us. We don't know whether our precautions, whether these rules will uphold under any level or all levels of transmission in the community. More and more we're seeing community spread here in Attleboro. And at some point, we worry that the effectiveness of our means might compromise that. So we remain hyper vigilant to try to see whether we're seeing any signs of that. Now, as of today, the answer is no. But I also have to admit that the number of cases that we're managing right now, it could happen at any moment and very quickly because there's a lot going on all at once. So we are concerned that change in our viral conditions will have a potential impact. The other thing that I would want to point out is that the environmental conditions in our buildings were different in the fall than they will be in the winter. And we really haven't got into the winter season and really experienced what that's going to be like. Now, Mr. Furtado is going to talk a little bit about the conference that he attended, teleconference he attended on winter ventilation from an expert that the state provided us. But the key point here is that while what the state is saying might very well be true about up to this point, I don't think good science says that we have enough data on what these changes might do to our success. And so for that reason, I think we have to be very, very cautious moving forward. So for that reason, we need to be poised to act, which is why I want to talk a little bit about the use of remote days as a district. So we've talked about this briefly to take us off this subject for just a brief moment about the fact that we can now have remote days via snow days. So if we have a snowstorm this winter, the district will announce that it's a snow day. And what that will mean is that rather than it's a day off, we're going to have it as a school day and just everyone's going to operate remotely. And that day is going to count. We don't have to make up that day. So that's, we think, really, really good news. And we're very excited to try that out. And while they've made it very clear that this is just for this year, we're hopeful that this is going to be such a success that they'll consider it on a larger scale in the future. So, it'll be a similar process to what we've had in the past, which is that, there'll be a district call that tomorrow is canceled. There'll be no in-person learning. Therefore, everyone's home remote. And then the students the cohort that was supposed to be in school, they will have a remote school day with their teacher, like they would have if they had come into the building. And the other cohort who was having their remote day will continue to just be remote. That's the basic setup of those days. So those remote days are a concept I think we can understand. And what I want to do is apply this idea to our other problems. So we already know that we might face a situation where we have in-school transmission of the virus. With the amount of virus in the community, there are a lot of people who say to me that we're just lucky at this point that it hasn't happened yet. And I don't know that it's luck. I think we've worked really, really hard, and I think we've really done some good work about keeping ourselves safe. But as levels rise and rise, it would be foolish to think that that's an impossibility. So if we have a case with in-school transmission in a building, we are likely to call a remote day for that school, or maybe a couple of remote days, to give us time to make sure that the building's clean, make sure we understand what happened, take steps to ensure that we don't have that transmission does not turn into an outbreak, right? So we already have the virus in the community. We already have transmission in the community. Our rates show that the virus is spreading amongst us already. This is already going on. And if that happens, that's just more of what's happening everywhere. What we can't allow to happen, right, is to have an outbreak, to have our practices in school result to lots of people spreading the disease among each other. So that's the thing that has to be stopped. And that's why if we have in-school transmission, we will be calling remote for that school as a way of combating the spread and making sure that we take the steps we need to ensure everybody's safety. Likewise, and we're almost there in a couple schools already, if we have issues with staff being out, either because they're quarantined or they have positive cases, or they're just staying home because they have symptoms and they're not sure whether it's just, their allergies or whether they have COVID, right? And we're asking people to be sensitive to the fact that they shouldn't come in if they have any symptoms and to be overly cautious. This is resulting in situations where it's very, very difficult to cover our buildings because we don't have those subs. So it is conceivable that in the near future, especially under the conditions that we're dealing with right now, that we're going to have to call remote days for specific schools simply because there aren't enough adults to run the building that day. And that's a very strange condition, but I want the community to be aware that this is a real thing that we're grappling with. And I don't know any other way to do this and make sure that everybody's safe. So it is conceivable that in a school, we're going to decide we're going to have to go remote for a couple of days because right now there are too many people around and we can't operate safely. So I wanted to let everybody know that. And one of the ways that we're going to do this is we're using our new platform Remind to communicate this year. So we need to get many of our schools are already up and running and doing some really good communication through Remind. We need to get that way as a district as well. So tomorrow, I'm going to send a test message to every family in the district. And I'm going to then ask principals to notify parents that I did that and that anyone that didn't get it needs to identify themselves and we have to work out whatever the problems are. If you receive it, but you receive it in a place you didn't want it. So sometimes the phone number that we have in the computer isn't the phone number you really want to get a message like that on. So in those cases, we can have to change phone numbers. So for a lot of reasons, we got to work through making sure that everybody's going to have access to the messaging from the district as we make decisions like this. So we're going to be running that test this week, and I would ask families to be looking for that. Principals will send out a message alerting people that that's happened. And if you didn't get it, let us know. Or if you did get it and you want to make some sort of change, let us know. And we're going to try to iron out all the wrinkles in our use of Remind this year. The next thing I wanted to talk about briefly is attendance. It is true, and I've certainly heard a lot of talk out there about how attendance in the district is down. It is not apocalyptically down, as some people would tell you. Our rates are below their normal, but we're still seeing attendance district-wide. That's, depending on the day we're talking about, but, we're over 80s, and at the high school, which is where I think the biggest problem is, we're starting to dip a little bit below that 80%, but still much better than I've heard some people claim. Part of the problem is understandable. We want kids who don't feel well to stay home until they feel better, or they end up having to go get tested. So we want people to be cautious about sending their kids to school if there's any reason to be worried about it. That's going to result in decreased attendance. We are quarantining students, right? Someone comes in positive, we do the contact tracing, we figure out who all the close contacts are, and then we quarantine a number of people all at once. So those people are being sent home, being kept home, in many cases against their will. They'd like to be here, they feel fine, they're upset that they're being prevented from coming. But then we have another group of people who are saying that they don't feel safe sending their kids to school and they're keeping them home and they just want their kids to participate remotely. Not in the AVA, which I should point out, and Ms. Regan's going to talk a little bit about the AVA separate from this, but I just want to remind everybody, the AVA was designed for people who cannot participate in school this year. Now, because of all the uncertainty around how safe school was going to be, we made the decision to be much more inclusive in terms of who we would allow to be in the AVA. I have to say, as I sit here, almost at Thanksgiving, I often wonder whether or not we made a mistake in being as liberal as we were as a district in letting so many people participate in the AVA. We have almost 1,200 students in the AVA. And from my perspective, that number is far in excess of what it should be. We do have families who need it. So the number would never be zero. And we do have families who I think are successful and enjoying it, and it's suiting their situation. And under these conditions, we're okay with that as well. But quite frankly, I don't think that the ABA is a better option for most students. And we're seeing many, many students struggle with it. And we're even seeing some students, disengaging from it. And so, we need to do something about that. And so for the people who, are on the ABA waiting list, there isn't an appetite on the part of the administration to make any sort of expansion of the ABA. As the state is saying more and more people need to be in person. That would be contrary to where we're supposed to head overall. So for the people who are either on the ABA waiting list because they're hopeful that they're going to get in, I want to be clear, there isn't a lot of movement in that direction. And then for the people who they've heard what the ABA is like and don't want that as their choice, and so they're just staying home, I need to point out to families that if your child is in the hybrid model, whether by choice or not, they need to come to school when their cohort is in school. There is not an option to choose to day in and day out not come to school, right? We have compulsory attendance laws in Massachusetts, and their not coming is to the child's detriment, right? Almost in a one-to-one correlation, these students are not doing well, right? The absence of any contact with their teachers is creating a situation in which kids are not getting the best education that they can. And it is very, very disruptive for schools to try to meet the needs of these students under conditions that are difficult to begin with. So for all of these reasons, it's really, really important that we work with families, and I'm going to be working with principals as they reach out to families and make it clear that they need to send their kids to school and come up with plans on how we can address what the concerns are and get these kids back to school. Because under the law, families are allowed 7 absences in 6 months that are unexcused, right? And so just deciding I'm not sending my kids in on a hybrid day, that's an unexcused absence from our perspective. And we have many, many students who are well in excess of that 7 that's allowed under the law. So we as a district have to do something about this. We can't be negligent and not address the fact that we have kids whose academic performance demonstrates that they're not doing well and that we're allowing them to continue to stay home when they're supposed to be in school. So this is a thorny issue. I know that there's a lot of sensitivity around that. We'll try to work through that, but I need the community to know that this is something that we have to make some traction on for the good of the kids and for the overall functioning of the district. My last item that I wanted to talk about tonight, I just wanted the committee to know that the Chromebooks are in, all 70-something pallets of them. It's going to take us almost 2 months to work through distributing these things. It's a complicated, phased process, which if the committee wants to learn more about it, we certainly can get into, but I think for the community to understand is that our plans are to be fully one-to-one by mid-January. Some people will be receiving these in the near future. Other people, it's a little bit further out, but we'll be in phases, distributing new books, collecting old books, depending on what grades we're talking about, and getting us to a place where every kid has a device in the next 2 months. So that's really, really exciting news for us. If there weren't this other context that we're operating with, I think we would be taking a moment to really celebrate that we're finally getting to a place where our technological materials are much more in keeping with what other communities are able to provide their kids.
Thank you. I guess to start, I did want to thank you thank you about something that you said, which was that you pushed back a little bit against the idea that we were, we've been lucky, because you do hear that from some corners, and may there be some luck involved, I suppose so, as with anything. But if there's been no in-school transmission simply because we were lucky, then Attleboro would be an outlier as opposed to other districts throughout the state, throughout the country, frankly, and that's just not the case. I think so far, in the circumstances we've been working with in this area, it's shown that what we put in place, the guidelines have been working. So, it's through hard work. It's through, maybe some scientific issues that we didn't understand with how this passes, but it certainly is more than luck. And that's not to say that as things change and the virus levels get worse and the weather changes, that there won't be any transmissions, because I don't think anyone knows or thinks that for sure. But I do think it's important to point out that it's not simply a matter of pure luck to this point. One question I did have, and I'll preface it by saying that I'm starting the question with the background that I absolutely agree that right now staying in hybrid makes the most sense district-wide, and that given the rising numbers that we're currently facing, given the fact we're going to be coming up on holidays, and that I think a lot of us imagine that in the near future we will be in the red as a community, that going in person at this point doesn't make sense. And so, I do agree with that. But I guess my question is, over the summer, the administration has said it would be feasible to do in person at the middle school and elementary school levels and not the high school. So I guess my question is, what's changed? And I'm asking that looking forward to the spring when hopefully numbers start to go down. We're in the yellow, but we still have the protocols we have to implement spacing wise and whatnot. Will we be able to be in person at that point? Because I was under the assumption that would be the case eventually as numbers got better.
So it's a very fair question, because we did say that. One, I think our answer during the summer was a theoretical answer. Now that we're in buildings and we're living this, we have practical experience to draw from. So that's a piece of it. Another is that as part of a theoretical answer, it was really a math problem to us. We've got X number of students and X number of square feet of classroom space. And, if you divide it according to the formula that the state is giving us, we technically have enough space to fit the kids in. And, that math hasn't changed. The square footage is technically there. But when you go into the buildings, and, it's been very helpful to me to, understand what we're up against by visiting the buildings and seeing them and seeing what our success looks like in classrooms and, operating as a building. I now have a much deeper understanding of how, if we brought everybody back, right, a lot of the procedures and protocols that we're doing that are keeping us safe, we wouldn't be able to maintain. And, distancing is a big part of it. Again, the square footage is there, but what those rooms would actually look like, it's not tenable. But that said, my comments are really about what life looks like right now, right? When we talk about the spring, I think there's a real reason to believe that we're starting to be seeing the impact of, mass vaccinations. We'll also have a much better sense of, where the boundaries of our success lie, having gone through the winter, right? So as we head in, as we start to deal with, not being able to be outside as much, not as much fresh air, it looks like there's reason to believe that the virus levels in the community are going to continue to rise. If we go through all of that and we still don't have problems, then I think just like the state took some pretty bold action in this new guidance, I wouldn't be surprised, because they understand what we're up against. And the statement that I shared with the committee from Mass Association of School Superintendents, right? I mean, it laid out many of the same concerns that I personally have about Attleboro, are what moving from hybrid to fully in person, then they're going to have to change the guidance. And if they're going to change the guidance, I think we would all hope that they would do that, because with more understanding and with changing conditions, it's safe to change that guidance. But under the current guidance, under the current conditions, it's just not imaginable. But, you know, I couldn't have really imagined where we are now in August, and I don't know what to expect come March either. But I just think we have to take it as it comes.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Geddes?
I do have a number of questions, but I didn't know if it would make sense to go through the other administration updates first.
Well, do you have any specific questions for Mr. Sawyer's presentation?
Not right now, no. But
Yeah, then I said, if you have questions that you know are going to be about the ABA or the ventilation or things that Mr. Furtado would hit on, then I'd say just wait. And then once we're done with everything, people might have questions for the administration as a whole. But if anyone has a question specifically on what Mr. Sawyer presented on, you know, I think it makes sense to ask those now.
Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Minichi?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Superintendent, for all the detail. As always, it was a lot to unpack because we haven't met in quite some time. I do have some questions that I will, of course, defer because I think they might be more appropriate for maybe Mark or Lori. I did have just a couple of notes on here because I was asked, I'm going to ask this question. When we have staff listed on here in terms of numbers, my assumption is that it's inclusive of teachers, administrators, the folks at Sodexo, subs, Whitson's, and any other consultants. Is that
So usually,
Is that the
usually staff means any of our employees. For the purposes of this report, I've also included other people who work for our vendors but are working in our buildings with kids. So, you know, Whitson's and our other vendors are included in this.
I appreciate that. We got that question. I thought it was important. My assumptions are exactly what you said. So thank you for that. All right. You actually touched on absent rates and the waiting list for remote students. One of the things I will say, Chairman, is I do agree with you in that, you know, I might have mentioned at one point in a prior meeting that, you know, there might be some luck involved with not having the transmissions in the schools. I don't want to take away from the work that's being done to keep kids safe by everybody, by administrators, teachers, even the students themselves, and of course the nursing staff who, when we do get cases, has to go through as thorough of a process as they can to tie back where the origins of that transmission might be held. So I don't want any of that to be lost here. My concern, though, is that unless we're actually testing everybody on a regular basis, we're really not going to know exactly what the transmissions are in the schools. And I don't think we are getting the funding of that. I heard Governor Baker's, you know, his press conference the other day, but I didn't get any kind of indication that that's the type of financial, you know, assistance that they were going to be providing for schools. Would that be a fair statement to say?
Yeah, so right now, the best the state can do is a testing program in which we could test students who are symptomatic.
Right.
And we thought, we went through what the cost benefit of that was, the reporting and the amount of work to participate in that project was pretty onerous. And when we thought through what the benefit was, we couldn't think of one. You know, whether the student tests positive or not, they'd still have to go get a test. And that test is the only one that really matters. And so, you know, knowing that the rapid test says that you're positive wouldn't actually really change any of our protocols. So we didn't see what the benefit of putting in that extra work was, just, you know, to have a preview into, you know, the test that you have to still go get anyways. It wasn't going to really change anything. We very much would like to have testing. We think that robust testing would be part of a safer and better environment. The administration wants testing, but until we have the means to do, you know, the kind of testing that's actually going to pay a dividend, you know, we're going to sit on the sidelines because so far the various things that have come our way, you know, wouldn't actually change much. In fact, some of the things that we've looked into, we're afraid that it would have the adverse effect of making people feel too comfortable when it really wasn't going to prove anything. You know, as we've seen, you can test negative and then, you know, go do something that you think you're safe to do and then test positive 2 days later. And it turns out that you are, you know, spreading it to multiple people. We've seen this. I know that there's a question about, you know, how we, you know, do we really know whether or not people are transmitting the disease in schools? And, you know, absolutely do we know? I agree. We don't absolutely know. But, you know, up until this week, our contact tracing has been tracing back every positive case back to an exposure to another known positive case, with one exception, right? So while there could be people in the building who are asymptomatic, I guess it doesn't have to just be kids, and they could be giving it, you know, transmitting the disease to other people. If that were the case, I think we would eventually start to see people who are testing positive with symptoms so that they're actually testing, right? Not every, you know, asymptomatic doesn't only transmit to other people asymptomatically. You know, you can, if you get the disease from someone who was asymptomatic, you can be symptomatic. And if that were happening, we'd see evidence of that. Up until, you know, now, that has not been the case. The number of cases we're dealing with since the weekend, I mean, we had another 6 cases today. There's so many cases going on. I can't say definitively that that hasn't changed. I checked in today to make sure that we still don't have any that we know of, and the answer is we don't. But as community spread goes, you know, I do have concerns about that. That's one of the things we have to look at, because if we're spreading it amongst ourselves in the schools, then, you know, then the whole conversation changes. But I just really have to push back on this notion that just because they're asymptomatic people and we're not testing, therefore we don't really know. I would say that up to this point, we can definitively say we know, because there's no evidence that people are catching it in a way that we don't know where they're getting it from, which is why the state says that they don't see that as in-school transmission.
I think the only other note I was going to have, Chairman, is it maybe at some point in one of these meetings, having one of the nurses in or somebody from the Department of Health to kind of go through the contact tracing could alleviate some potential concerns. I mean, we're always going to have them as long as the virus is around. And just to conclude my statement and move along here, yeah, I agree with you, Chairman, in terms of the course of action we should be taking tonight, which is, you know, what we're already doing currently. But obviously, we have to keep an eye on where things go. It was a hugely high number in the entire community last week. I think we more than doubled our cases from the previous week. The mayor posted some numbers today, and it's not even Thursday, and it looks like we're on our way to going even higher than it was last week. So we still have these concerns, but I am trusting the administration and everything that you've put forward to try and keep everybody safe so that we can continue to have students getting the best levels of education we can provide. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with any questions for Mr. Sawyer? All right, don't see any. So Ms. Regan, I believe you're next.
Thank you, Chairman Withers. If I may, before I speak about the ABA, I just wanted to thank the Attleboro Garden Club and recognize them for donating books to our libraries in honor of American Education Week. Miss Naomi Cordell came and presented before the closure last year. So she and Jocelyn Verrier were instrumental in selecting the books, and they'll be distributed to all of our schools this week. So thank you to the Garden Club. So transitioning to the ABA, I really do want to take a moment to thank all of the staff, the families, and the students who have partnered with us and to make this new virtual learning environment a reality. We recognize that it has taken a toll on some families, and we've learned a lot about education with each other, and we've worked hard to try to take some time to provide open houses so families could come and ask questions. We've scheduled parent conferences. We have, set up pictures for students that are in the ABA. And as I said before, and I'll say it again, we've never done this before. And so taking the time to listen to some of the feedback that families are giving us, and we've been working hard to be responsive. So thank you again for your continued support, and we appreciate that. One of the things that I did want to talk about specifically was that we are currently working with our ABA teachers to increase more social emotional experiences in the ABA. That's one thing that families have reached out to us significantly with, asking for more support in that area. And one other thing that we were able to provide is our families that are in the K-5 platform, Accelerate Education, needed some more technical support in uploading and just working with the platform itself. So we were able to hire someone to help with that, or not hire someone, but we had someone that was available that was able to help us with that process. And thinking specifically about the numbers for the ABA, since the beginning of the year, we've had 100 students transfer out of the ABA to the hybrid model. We've had about 50 students transfer from the hybrid model to ABA. And currently right now at the elementary level, which is K-5 in that platform, we have about 12 on the late waiting list. I can't say this for sure, but anecdotally speaking with families about the platform and how it worked, one thing that they said is that it was difficult to instruct using the platform, and it was difficult to replicate the teaching that happens in our in-person hybrid learning model. And so I think that was one of the major reasons why some of these families went back into the hybrid learning model. At the middle school level, we had about 40 students transition to the hybrid model and 50 students come into the ABA, and we have 18 on the waiting list, and that's grades 6 through 8. And at the high school, we had approximately 20 students return to the hybrid model and 20 students come in to the ABA. And we have about 130 on the waiting list for ABA. So.
Any questions for Ms. Regan? Mr. Domenici?
Just a comment, considering that my 3 children are in the ABA. I just a lot of credit should be given. Superintendent Sawyer, I know we're probably stretching the boundaries of what we ever thought a virtual academy would look like, and I agree with that. These are amazing circumstances with which to try to pull this off on the fly, essentially. But 10 weeks in, I think we've kind of found some rhythm. Yes, there's been some challenges along the way. The course curriculum is challenging, which I think is a good thing. For my kids, it works, and for a lot of others. And I just wanted to give some credit for doing this. We're running another school essentially within the school system. And I know we do that a little bit with the Attleboro Community Academy, but that's about 1/20th the size of what we're pulling off here with the virtual academy. So when the world gets right again, I still think that having the virtual academy, probably on a smaller scale, will be beneficial. There may be homeschool students that are not part of the Attleboro Public School District that might consider being part of it, knowing that we have this kind of an option out there. So I absolutely wanted to give some credit for that, and from some real shared experiences of how well, at least it's going for us. Not without challenges, but overall, my kids are engaged, and that's all I can ask for. And the faculty who are supporting the ABA are doing a phenomenal job, because their ratios are high. We're keeping numbers down in school in the hybrid model out of necessity, which I think have some benefits as well to the overall learning. ABA is largely using the learning management system, so there's like a 35 or so to 1 facilitator to student to facilitator ratio, but the facilitators are highly motivated, highly involved, and we've had a lot of good experiences about that. I had one quick question for you, and I don't necessarily know it's ABA related, but it's kind of teaching and learning, and it had to do with the level of pace of learning going on within the school year this year. Maybe you can touch on some of that with ABA, but given the fact that we're hybrid and the kids are not in school 5 days a week getting in-person instruction, where do you find the overall rate of learning this year within the Attleboro Public Schools? Are we at or near where we should be, even under normal circumstances?
So I think there's a couple of variables there that need to be taken into consideration, given that students were out of school since last spring and we were in a remote environment. And so there were some students that do need, or there are students that do need more support. And so I think we took some great care at the beginning of the year when the students came in to actually see where they were and then meet them where they are educationally and instructionally. We've been providing them with the supports that they need so that they can move forward. So as far as pace is concerned, I'm not sure if that's probably the most important thing. I think it's more about what our students need and personalizing that instruction based upon, what is needed so that they can feel successful moving forward.
And I can appreciate that. So maybe I should rephrase it more like, are we where we expected we would be 10 weeks into the school year based upon the expectations we set for ourselves? Because I agree, perhaps pace is maybe not the right approach, given the fact that there was some time at the end of last year that we had to reconsider. Yeah. Are we hitting where we expected we would hit with everything going on?
So teachers are working diligently with the in-person model and with the remote model in the Google Classroom. Are they where they would like to be? No, but every teacher always expects more of themselves and of their students all day, every day. And so I would say that if you ask a teacher, they're probably deliberately moving a little bit slower than they had in the past because they wanted to ensure that the students understand the concepts before moving forward. And given that they see them at the beginning of the week and the end of the week, they do take extra care to make sure that's happening. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Mr. Guttis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Ms. Regan, for the update. And to echo Mr. Domenichi's comments, thank you to the AVA educators. I know they're dealing with larger numbers than they had anticipated, but the entire staff is doing everything that they can. I think there is a tough purgatory in some ways related to AVA, because I've heard from a number of families that have loved it. Their students have really thrived in it. And they're excited that they had the opportunity. And I agree with Mr. Domenichi that it's another great option that we should continue to offer beyond this year. But I've also heard from two other subgroups. There's the group of folks that want to be in AVA but can't because of the wait list. So they don't want to keep their students in the buildings but can't pull them out. And then there are some families that are really struggling with AVA, but don't feel that the buildings are safe enough yet to transition into hybrid. So I don't know if there's, I guess I'm more saying this for community awareness, that this is a struggle, and just as I'm saying it, seeing you nod your head, it sounds like it's something you have heard as well. I did, and thank you to Mr. Sawyer as well for bringing up the attendance. When you gave the wait list numbers, I did ask about attendance late last week, and I'd have to go check all of the emails, but it seemed like of all of the students on the wait list, there were only a handful. So you had, it looks like the numbers you gave were right around 170 or so total in the district that are on the wait list. But it seems like only a handful of those are still attending their hybrid days on a regular basis. Is that accurate-ish?
So let me make sure I understand. You're asking about which students are not coming into school on hybrid days because they're waiting for
the students that are on the wait list to get into AVA.
Yeah.
But don't feel comfortable sending their students into the buildings anymore.
Yeah. So currently at the elementary level, and these numbers could be wrong too. So from what I can gather,
it can fluctuate within.
It's a moving target. I have about 5 students at the elementary level that are doing that, 3 at the middle school level, and the folks at the high school.
And what?
The students at the high school.
And all of the high school students. Okay, thank you. So I guess in a way, the ABA has been a double-edged sword. It's been a blessing for a lot of families. It's been an unexpected benefit to the situation that we're in. But it's also caused a lot of issues that I don't think we should fully ignore. So it wasn't too much of a question, but more of a statement or a discussion point that I want us to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with any questions for Ms. Regan?
One question.
All right. Sure, Mr. Hill.
Yeah, hi. So it has to be a one-to-one with the elementary and middle school students going from one model to the other. Could you hear that?
I couldn't. Could you repeat it, Mr. Hill?
Sure. Just wondering, with the transfer from one model to the other, does it have to be one for one? So if someone wants to go back into Willett, for instance, does someone have to, from Willett, go into ABA?
No, it doesn't work like that. So anyone who in a particular, any particular grade level leaves the ABA, then what we'll do is we'll identify the next student that's on the waiting list and invite them to join the ABA depending on what grade level it is. So currently right now, most of the students are in 4th and 5th grade that are on the waiting list. And so we haven't had students leaving that in a couple weeks. So it's pretty much been stable, where in the beginning we had much more fluctuation.
Thank you.
Mr. Domenici?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Hill just kind of triggered a quick question. If we were strictly just Attleboro Public School, no ABA, and strictly hybrid, do we have capacity? Like we have capacity for hybrid, right? 6,000 students, 3,000 in one day, 3,000 in another across our 9, right? So I guess my point being that when a student or a family wants to go from ABA to hybrid back to the public schools, there's not any case of spacing or issues or class sizes that have to be considered. We should, in other words, have space. Even if all 1,200 wanted to come back to APS, we could support that, right?
Well, no. We reassigned teachers out of APS into the ABA. So, there are classrooms we would normally have that have been dissolved, and those teachers are in ABA. So if we dissolved the ABA, we could bring them all back, but we would have to create new sections by reassigning teachers out of ABA into APS. So, the sum total of the whole organization, yes, right? It doesn't really matter whether they're here or there, but the problem is that, you have the schools are organized by classes, and there's only so many available seats in any one class, in any one grade. And so, that creates the distortions that make it so that you can't necessarily bring somebody back to this building, but you might have to, the seat might for them might be over in that building.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't necessarily thinking one building over the other, and I was truly probably just doing more of the math, right? Obviously, it's not as simple as it sounds, and I think every family has been made aware, whether you transition one way or the other, it doesn't just happen immediately. There's a transition time to get there, and I imagine that some of that is there. But we don't actually have a waiting list for students going back to hybrid, right? We've been able to accommodate those.
Correct.
Okay.
Every student that wishes to go back to hybrid.
Yeah, as we've expressed tonight, we want as many kids to come back to hybrid as possible. And just while we're talking, so 2 things. 1, totally agree that the ABA, as I've said before, the ABA is not going away. The ABA is going to outlast COVID. It's a thing that's here to stay. Now, not on the scale. As I've said before, I don't think the district is operating optimally with 1,200 kids in the ABA. That is at a scale that is I don't think makes any sense. But to your point earlier, absolutely, the number's not going to be zero ever again, right? The ABA is going to exist and be a thing that we do. And I also want to be sure that people understand that for the families that are having success with it, we are committed to the ABA through this year, right? We don't want to disrupt people's learning, especially when it's successful. So we do know that some families are thriving in the ABA, are enjoying the experience, and it's working for them. And that's great. Why would we get in the way of something that's working? But we also know that there are people, and I think there are more of these, that struggle with it, that it's not a good fit for, that what we do in the hybrid environment is closer to what they need. And we're saying that while in the summertime, because we didn't know really what to expect, we had a hard time telling people, you've got to come to school when I can't say whether or not it's going to be safe or not. We now have good data to say that that concern is off the table. And so for the people who aren't having a wonderful experience, we need to work with those families to get them to believe us that your child will be safe at school with us, because that's been the experience, and we have the data to prove that. So let's find success, because success is what we need here. And so for the people that are being successful, we're not going to change anything.
Thank you.
Anyone else on ABA? Okay. Going down the line, Mr. Furtado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the superintendent noted, I virtually attended a seminar put on by DESE regarding facilities and sort of a collection of everything they've learned to date. They used a Harvard epidemiologist to talk about some of the metrics and some of the approaches that they have found to be most successful and were core to the DESE guidelines for facilities. Happy to report that we have, through our work with our consultant, complied with everything that was brought up at that seminar. One thing they did point out was the value of air purifiers in each classroom. Those have been put on order by the city, so those are in the works. And especially as we get to the colder months. So we, regarding air exchanges, air handling systems, heating, cooling, disinfecting, we hit all of their metrics solidly. They recommended using CO2 measures as a indicator of air exchange in rooms, which is what we do. We just produced our first report last week for the AEA. However, one of the interesting things that they brought up, and one of the things that we have been discussing throughout our reopening talks with the AEA and after, has to do with temperature. So you can introduce a minimum of 15% fresh air in a air exchange system and not have it impact the temperature of the building. So, back in the summer when we talked about all of this stuff, we sort of warned that when the cold months did come, because of the fresh air requirements, we were going to face some issues with heating the buildings. As the temperature has gone from the 80s down to now the 50s, we've seen hints of that. So we've got rooms sort of in the mid 60s in terms of temperature. All of our heating systems are active at this point. As we get daytime temperatures down into the 30s and 20s, it's going to get far more exciting. And in the seminar, DESE strongly suggested that districts just make their parent communities and their staffs understand that these challenges, you're not going to get a heating system to heat a building to 70 degrees, introducing 15% 15-degree air. It's not going to happen. So they advise districts to communicate with their families that they should be expecting cooler classroom situations and perhaps, having their students come to school prepared for that. So, stay in their coats rather than take them off during the school day and things like that. Otherwise, as I said, we've hit all of their metrics and all of their practices dead on. Our CO2 report showed things in the range of 4 to 6 to 800 parts per million of CO2 in the rooms, which is exactly where it should be, to translate into something between 4 to 6 air exchanges per hour, which is exactly where that's supposed to be. So we were very happy with the kind of confirmation of our practices and look forward to getting the air purifiers in the room, and hope our parent community and our staffs are understanding of the temperature challenges we're going to face over the next 2 or 3 or 4 months.
Any questions for Mr. Furtado? Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Furtado, for that information. So I'm very comfortable with keeping the elementary schools and the middle schools in the hybrid mode. Something that I struggled with at the last meeting, and admittedly I'm still struggling with now, is the high school, in part because of these potential temperature fluctuations. Could you remind us what is the minimum temperature that is required to hold classes in the schools? And also, at what point do you see that we may not be able to meet that temperature requirement?
In Mass General Law for schools, the guideline is 66 to 68 as a minimum. We're struggling with that now, never mind in February.
Gotcha. And also, I know that,
if I may,
yeah,
you will not be able to keep a room at 66 and introduce 15% air at 20 or 30 of, it just won't happen.
okay. Thank you. And as a quick follow-up to that, I understand that we have the fresh air circulating, we're hitting the numbers as we should. We've also heard at this meeting and the last meeting reports of windows being opened. Is that recommended? Is there any harm to keeping the windows open? What's the positive or negative impact of doing so?
Yep. So, we have a wide variety of buildings of varying ages. And this building in Brennan specifically, while they have windows that operate, the air handling systems and the environmental systems work less effectively if the windows are open, as crazy as that sounds. So for these 2 buildings particularly and specifically, windows being open is not a good idea because the air handling system won't work as well. So while you will have the fresh air coming in, you probably won't get the air exchanges that you would get if the windows were closed, as ironic as that sounds. In our other buildings, other than Hyman Farnham Hill Roberts, which do not have windows that open, it would be best to keep them open. But again, as the temperature goes down, that's going to be a bigger struggle for staff to kind of tolerate those temperature conditions.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Geddes?
Thank you. Sorry, what you were saying triggered a couple of other questions. I'm sorry if I missed it, but did you give a timeline when you expect us to receive the purifiers for the classrooms?
No, the city took kind of charge of that, and they put that order in about a month ago. Those were on back order, but I haven't been given any indication that they've been told when they would come. I do know that the funds they used to buy them require them to be on site by the end of December, or the funds can't be used. So they're racing a clock themselves.
Okay, so thank you to the city for doing that for us. To Ms. Johnson's question about the air circulation and ventilation, I think she was asking specifically about the high school, but everything you were saying is district-wide. That's not exclusive to the high school in terms of room temperature variations and struggles to stay in that minimum range.
Yes, we'll have that everywhere. all of our, the CO2 reporting we have includes the high school classrooms. So in terms of air exchanges, the high school is also enjoying kind of 4 to 6, the 4 to 6 range that everybody else is currently. Again, that was last week, the first report. So we'll be doing those bi-weekly and providing those to the AEA for their comfort.
And so you also mentioned I think you said in the next few months it's going to get exciting as the temperature drops into the 30s and 20s or even lower. And Mr. Sawyer, earlier you talked about snow days just becoming remote days. Does the administration plan to incorporate temperature days at some points? Because if a classroom is itself down into the 50s because it's in the 20s or 30s outside, could kids sit in their winter coats and gloves and still function? Yes, but it probably wouldn't be ideal. But if it gets much colder than that in like January, February, are we still going to have kids coming to school if they're going to wear the same thing inside as they would outside?
Yeah, I mean, it is conceivable that if we find ourselves in a situation where at a certain temperature, we're right up against what's tolerable, and then the forecast is for a cold snap that's colder than that, we very well may have to.
Thank you.
Just to circle back on the temperature in the buildings and the issue caused by circulating 15 to 20% of the air from outside the building. I mean, that's going to cause problems in all buildings, not just the high school, correct?
Correct.
That's what you said. All right, and I imagine that's not specific to Attleboro either.
No, that's everywhere in the state. There's simply no way to handle that. Especially if you have buildings that are 20 to 40 to 50 years old. It's never going to happen.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Furtado? I don't see any other issues, any other items on your report, Mr. Sawyer?
That concludes my report.
Does anyone have any issues or questions, comments for the administration on the report of the administration as a whole? Mr. Geddes?
Not necessarily questions for the administration, but just to underline and emphasize a lot of what we heard. Last week, our average daily case number was 21.2, which was more than double what it was 2 weeks ago and the highest it's been since at least May 4th. 4.1% positivity rate is the highest we've seen since the start of school and possibly since the spring. We had 19 cases in the schools last week, which represents 1/3 of the positive cases for the entire year to date, a little more than 1/3, and it's more than the previous 5 weeks combined. Mr. Sawyer mentioned that we've got 6 new cases today, which would put us on pace to cover the previous 6 weeks combined. We have now seen cases at all 3 levels, not just at the high school, as we had seen most of the school year so far. And I talked about the AVA issues, and Mr. Sawyer emphasized all of the operational issues that are currently happening. I'm very concerned about where we are as a community and where we are going, and I'm struggling with keeping the hybrid model going at this point. I appreciate the state and the idea of waiting for transmission in the schools to be a reason for closing the schools, but I would also rather err on the side of caution to not have transmission happen in the schools than to wait for students or educators to get sick because of being in the schools. So while I'm I'm considering a motion. I'm wondering if any other committee members have any thoughts on these, on all of this.
Any other comments on the report? Mr. Domenici?
Well, I guess since Mr. Geddes opened up the conversation, clearly, you know, from other meetings that we've had, you know, my concerns in general. Safety is always the priority. I also feel the administration prioritizes safety as number one. You've laid it out in your presentations previously, Mr. Sawyer, and I have no reason to believe otherwise. And I'm concerned about just how much the guidance has changed. I understand adding additional context, but again, the numbers do seem somewhat arbitrary, and that, you know, that rate of 10,000 to 50,000 population seems a bit wide. But I followed the guidance thus far in every vote that we've taken. So I want to be proactive and not reactive, but as we sit here right now, as concerned as I am, and I'm walking a very thin line, I'll continue to follow that guidance. But I can respect where your thinking is, Rob, because that's where mine has been for quite some time. We all know it's better educationally for kids to be in the building 5 days a week. But we have to battle with the safety concerns of the virus, which has been ramping up, and it's only going to get worse going into the next couple of months based upon what all the experts have said. So it's a balancing act, and one I think that we'll just have to continue to monitor and be very, you know, at least in getting together and making decisions, being as proactive as we can. So it's hard to make a conditional, you know, well, if the numbers hit this number after Thursday, then we should, I mean, if we think that there's some cause for concern with any report, we should immediately convene an emergency meeting and have that discussion. I think that's, you know, we're trying to do the best that we can in the best interest of our students, which is our number one priority. And of course, keeping our educators, our families, and our administrators, you know, all in mind. It's all important. It's a hard tightrope, but for me, my thoughts would be, at least as I stand here right now, if we had any motions, I'd have us continue the course for the immediate future. So those are my comments.
So, yeah, I would, well, first I would say, you know, I was thankful to the administration, or I am thankful to the administration for kind of giving a little bit more detail on what would happen if there was an outbreak, or not an outbreak, but transmission in a specific building of going remote for a few days and what that would look like. And I understand that, you know, was necessitated a bit by the new guidance from the state, but I do think it's helpful for the community to see and understand, you know, what would happen if, you know, my daughter's class at Coelho had a transmission, and to have that knowledge now of what the administration is looking to do, it would look to do if there's transmission, even if it doesn't reach the level of outbreak, to know what would happen, I think is helpful. Just to, I guess, remind those watching and the committee, you know, we're currently operating in a hybrid model throughout the district. Motions were made at the last meeting. 2 motions were voted to stay at hybrid at the lower 2 levels. The high school we didn't end up voting on. We don't need to take that up again. There's no requirement that we take that up again. So if no motion is made, we'll simply continue on for now in the hybrid model. And like we do every meeting, and, you know, throughout the week, continue to monitor the situation and address it as need be. So with that, I'll just, I guess, one more time, see if anyone has any questions or comments or anything they want to add to the discussion on the business report by the superintendent and the administration.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. You know, I stated already that I think that the hybrid definitely works in the elementary and the middle school. I'm also glad to hear that there is a plan that if there are environmental concerns, that if we're not able to keep a healthy environment, either temperature wise or air exchange wise, that there is a plan in place. But everything, if we're looking at the data continues to show that the safety measures work. And those safety measures, we need to give a great big thanks out to our teachers. Our teachers, not only it's the work that you do essential in the education of our children, but also in keeping our children safe. I'd like to thank them for their bravery and for their resiliency, and for them to know that what they are modeling, our students are observing that. And again, just to thank them for all of their hard work, because this wouldn't be working without their input, and without their hard work day in day. That concludes.
Thank you. Sounds good. Anyone else? All right, then I would thank the administration for their report and their continued diligence on this matter, and the constant providing of information that we get from you weekly or daily. Thank you very much. Moving on in our agenda, we have our minutes from our October 19th, 2020 meeting. The minutes were circulated with your packets. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or edits? No? All right, I'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Hill? Ms. Porto?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next, we have our consent agenda. As we've done in the last several months, we'll take it as a whole. I'll read the 6 items and then entertain the motion and a roll call vote. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,024 from Jacob Connor, who is donating the remaining money he raised for his Eagle Scout project to be deposited in the ELC gifts donation line. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $40 from Target to the gifts donation line at the high school. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $100 to the high school Best Bodies from Rocco Carlino in honor of the one-year anniversary of Nolito's passing. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $20,500 from the Feinstein Foundation as broken down in my memorandum dated November 13th, 2020. Motion to accept the donation of $19.12 school lunch balances from Paula Haig to the Attleboro Public School Lunch Program to help resolve outstanding school lunch balances. And finally, motion to accept a donation in the amount of $3.25 from Bay State Textiles to Hill Roberts Gifts donation line.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
Just a really quick point, again, since Jacob's name came up, I got to tour the facility after it was done. Just a phenomenal job by Jacob and his team and the community for that matter, because he did a lot of fundraising. And it's great that he had this type of money to give back to the ELC. I know it was a very personal project for him, and I hope at some point in time in one of these school committee meetings, we get the opportunity to bring Jake on or have him come online and just kind of talk through how the project went and show some of the after pictures.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
And I'd just like to echo Mr. Benish's comments and thanks to Jacob, this very, very generous and very thoughtful donation.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
All right, thank you. That completes our consent agenda tonight. Next, we have our subcommittee meetings, and I'll start off with Finance and Budget. Mr. Larson?
The Finance and Budget Subcommittee met November 4th. We have 4 motions to bring forward to the full committee. As part of the meeting, we reviewed monthly financials. We're still running approximately a $2 million deficit. We've reviewed that in past meetings. We're going to continue to monitor that. City Hall is aware of it. There is some COVID funding that we believe will be instrumental in offsetting this deficit. So we'll continue to monitor it and keep the committee up to date. We had an MSBA update The high school situation with the fire that was in the closet is complete. That work is all done. We reviewed the cost and the insurance reimbursement and the rest of it. That all went very well. Special thanks to what really worked out well to get the building up to speed very quickly. Mr. Furtado and having a construction company right next door, conveniently enough, worked to our benefit. We didn't have to wait to get into somebody's timetable for a small project. We had lots of help right next door that we were able to tap to get the project done and get the school back in shape to be used properly. So that was a great thing there. We talked about the capital projects list. We have a motion coming forward about that. I believe you all had the opportunity to review that ahead of time. Also, earlier that day, we were invited to tour the new high school that's being built. I can tell you personally, from what I saw on the tour, the building is amazing. The community should be very proud for having taken the step to go forward with that project. I think they're going to be incredibly happy with the work that's being done over there and what everybody that's been involved in getting that project done. I think everybody should be very happy with that work. So there's a lot to be proud of there. That having been said, the motions coming forward, these were all unanimous from the subcommittee to the full committee. The first is a motion to approve the capital improvement report as submitted.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Is there any conversation or any discussion or questions? Okay. Mr. Withers?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Ms. Larson, yes. Shannon?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes. Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Second one is motion to send to the municipal council to approve process prior year invoices totaling $338.99 to be paid from the high school's gifts donation account, which were not received in time to process during the closing of the FY20 school year.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? You should have had backup in your packet with all this. All right, seeing nothing. Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Larson, yes. Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Withers?
Yes.
All right, 8-0, that passes. Third, motion to declare 21 copiers as described in the Director of Finance's memo dated 10/31/2020 as surplus. I'll entertain a motion for us.
So moved. Second.
These are copiers from the copy center. There's a process. We have to declare them as surplus, send them to City Hall. City Council has to declare them as surplus, and eventually we believe we have a vendor who will actually take them, and we may actually get a couple dollars from them at the end of the day. But it might take a couple months to go through this whole process. So people don't see them disappear tomorrow. Don't be surprised.
So moved.
Any other questions or concerns? All right. Mr. Withers?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Ms. Larson, yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That passes. The last motion really stemmed from a conversation that we were having at the subcommittee level. As many of you know, school committee policy that was put in place 4 or 5 years ago states that the administration should bring forward to the committee its first draft of the FY22 budget in the meeting the first week of December. We were actually having the conversation of the fact that the FY21 state budget still has not been passed. They're getting closer. It was supposed to be done back in June. So the fact that the fiscal year that we're currently living in, the state actually has not passed a budget that we're currently supposedly living to. We thought it would be very difficult for the administration to bring forward an FY22 budget under the circumstances. So the conversation kind of led itself to, maybe we could put this off for 3 months. We thought that was a somewhat reasonable proposition. We can always look at it as it gets closer to what we're proposing February of 21. Hopefully things may be a little bit clearer. There'll be a little bit more time for the administration to make a more meaningful presentation under all the circumstances that we're currently living in. So the subcommittee voted to bring forward this motion to the full committee for its consideration. Motion to waive the December requirement for presenting the FY22 budget due to the current circumstances until the end of February 2021.
So moved.
Second? Second. All right. Are there any other concerns or questions, or anyone want to have a discussion about
I assume that, the dialogue with City Hall on next year's budget is ongoing, or at least they're aware of this, or I know we're earlier than they are, but no issues with them.
We have not discussed this with City Hall. We're still, again, watching the 21 process. The initial numbers out of the House, which have been announced, don't change the circumstance for the city in terms of its 21 commitments, including the school budget. However, that's now going to the Senate and then conference and then final approval. So that process still has a long way to go. And it would be very hard to kind of discuss 22 without understanding the implications of 21 on their reserves and that sort of thing.
Okay. Any other concerns or questions? Seeing none. Mr. Withers?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Larson, yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Finally, we have our policy and personnel report, and pinch hitting for Mr. Storrs today is Mr. Geddes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have a number of motions coming out of policy and personnel. For the sake of time, I am going to group these somewhat. And I'll follow Mr. Storrs' typical lead of saying these were all voted unanimously out of the subcommittee, so they do not require a separate motion here for the full committee. First, I'll start with the motion to approve the edits to policy EBCFB, COVID-19 employee policy update, recreational travel, and mandatory self-quarantine. These were very minor edits, and I'll look to Ms. Singer to make sure I'm explaining this correctly. But specifically, Ms. Singer added to the policy the website that lists from the state that lists the safe states, as few as those are now, that do allow for safe travel for Massachusetts residents. And it also, there was a slight edit to align more closely with the city of Attleboro's travel policy as well. Am I missing anything there, Ms. Singer? Do a roll call vote. Mr. Withers?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes, yes, so the motion passes. There were 3 motions to remove policies from the policy binder. Policy DIB, APS Education Fund. Policy IKFA, the early graduation criteria. And policy JFABB, admission of exchange students. The administration explained that these policies are not part of Massachusetts Association of School Committee policies. They also don't necessarily reflect the practices here in the district at this time. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about any of those policies? They were all provided in the packet. All right, seeing none, we'll do another roll call. Mr. Geddes, yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Withers?
Yes.
Motion passes. Finally, we're just noting the review date for a number of other policies. Again, thankfully to the previous Policy and Personnel Subcommittee, just about all of our policies are within our 3-year timeline of reviewing and updating. So these are just noting that we have reviewed these policies and would like them to stay as is. So first is policy IJND, access to digital resources. IJNDC, internet publications. Policy IJOA, field trips. Policy exhibits IJOA E1 through E3. Policy exhibit JCA E1. Policy exhibit JF E1. Policy JFA, enrollment of children of non-residential staff. Policy exhibit JFA E1. Policy JFAA, AHS CTE admission policy. Policy JFAAA, integrated preschool peer model program admission policy. Policy JFABC, admission of transfer students. And policy JFB, continued enrollment of high school seniors. Does anybody have any questions or comments on any of these policies? Or noting the review date of these? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call. Mr. Withers?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Porto?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
And Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
And Mr. Geddes, yes. So motion passes. Thank you all very much. Our next policy subcommittee meeting is, I believe, January 4th. So we've got a long time before our next one. So we'll see that group in the new year. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Geddes. Does anyone else have any items to address before the committee tonight? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Domenici?
Yes.
Ms. Sawyer?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Porto? Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.